half a year after my daughter vanished. Her number sent a message again. The location, my late husband's office. Inside, a phone was still charging with her last voicemail playing. In that moment, I realized I'm happy to have you here. Follow my story to the end and tell me from which city you are watching so I can see how far my story has reached. I am Elaine Parker. I am 62 years old, and my life fell apart when my phone vibrated that night in March. I had gone exactly 6 months without a proper night's sleep. 6 months, dragging around a guilt that was eating me alive. 6 months asking myself if I could have done something different to prevent my daughter Audrey from disappearing without a trace. It was almost midnight when the message arrived. I was in the kitchen holding a cup of chamomile tea that had already gone cold when I heard the familiar WhatsApp sound. My heart stopped when I saw the name on the screen. Audrey, my love. Good night, Mum. My hands trembled so much I almost dropped the phone. Those 3 simple words cut through me like a dagger. For 6 months, I had waited for some sign. Anything to tell me my daughter was alive. But now that I had it in front of me, I could not process it. I immediately dialed her number straight to voicemail as always. I tried calling again and again. Nothing. But the message was there. Real. With the timestamp 11:58 p.m. 2 minutes ago. I tapped the location option with shaking fingers. The app loaded slowly. And when the pin appeared on the map, the air went out of my lungs. The address it showed was Industrial Street 534, the old office of my late husband, Walter. Walter had died of a heart attack 8 months ago. 2 months before Audrey disappeared. We had closed his auto repair shop and had never gone back there. The place was abandoned, waiting for us to make the decision to sell it. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling as if the world was spinning around me. How was it possible that Audrey's phone was at her father's office for all these months? The police had tracked her last known whereabouts to the downtown bus station, where cameras showed her boarding a bus toward the neighboring city. After that, nothing. I reread the message over and over, looking for any detail that would give me a clue. But it was so simple, so normal. Good night, Mom. Something Audrey had told me thousands of times during her 28 years of life. Something I would not hear again. Or so I had thought until tonight. The guilt crushed me again like a giant wave. The last few days before her disappearance had been tense between us. Audrey had been strange, nervous, asking questions about Walter that I did not know how to answer, questions about his finances, about the business, about papers she claimed to have found. I was so lost in my own grief that I did not give her the attention she deserved. Mom, Did Dad ever talk to you about other projects? She had asked me one afternoon while we were tidying Walter's things. About other bank accounts or partnerships. I told her no, that her father had always been very reserved about business, which was true. Walter handled everything related to the shop, and I took care of the house and my small bakery business. I never stuck my nose in his business. But now, sitting on my bed with that impossible message on the screen, I wondered if I should have paid more attention, if I should have listened more to Audrey instead of asking her to respect the mourning period. Half angry, half scared. She was carrying a small backpack and told me she was going to her friend Kathy's house for a few days, that she needed space to think. It did not seem strange to me. We all process loss differently. But Kathy called me 3 days later, asking if I knew where Audrey was because she had never arrived at her house. I got up and walked toward the window, looking at the empty street illuminated by the street lights. The neighborhood was in total silence, as if it were the only place in the world where stillness still existed. But my mind roared with 1,000 questions. Had Audrey been at Walter's office this whole time? Was it possible she had found something there that forced her to hide? Or did someone else have her phone and was playing a cruel trick on me? I checked the message again. Audrey's profile picture was still the same. A selfie she had taken on my 61st birthday, smiling next to the chocolate cake I had made for myself. Her connection status showed last seen a long time ago. But the message was new. It had just arrived. I decided I could not wait until morning. I needed to go to that office right now. Even if it was midnight, even if I had to break the lock. I needed to know what was going on. I dressed quickly and the first thing I found: old jeans and a long-sleeved shirt. I grabbed the car keys and my purse, stopping only to grab a flashlight from the kitchen drawer. The drive to Walter's office felt endless. Every red light seemed to last an eternity. Every empty street reminded me how alone I was in this world since Walter died and Audrey disappeared. I drove with my hands gripping the steering wheel, breathing irregularly. Industrial Street was completely dark when I arrived. Businesses closed early in that area, and at night it became a ghostly place. Walter's shop was at the end of the block, a small brick building with a faded sign that still reads, "Repairs." I parked in front of the entrance and sat for a few minutes, trying to calm my breathing. The building looked exactly the same as the last time I had been there. Dirty windows, peeling paint, the metal door secured with a padlock we had put on ourselves. But there was something different. A very faint light was filtering from under the door. I got out of the car with trembling legs. That line of light under the door hypnotized and terrified me at the same time. 8 months had passed since Walter's death, 6 since Audrey's disappearance. And no one had the keys to this place except us. I approached the main door and noticed something that chilled my blood. The padlock was on, but not locked. It was hanging from the staple as if someone had wanted to pretend the place was secured, but had forgotten to close it completely. I pushed the metal door and it opened with a squeak that cut the silence of the night. The familiar smell of the shop hit me immediately. Motor oil, rusty metal, and something else, something like dampness and abandonment. The light was coming from the small office Walter had in the back where he kept the business papers and took his breaks. I walked between the empty spaces where cars used to be repaired, feeling as if I were profaning a grave. The office door was ajar, with my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I pushed it open gently. What I saw inside took my breath away. On Walter's desk, connected to a charger I had never seen before, was Audrey's phone. The screen was on, showing the conversation with me, our message, exchanged with my reply that I had sent in the car. Audrey, where are you? Please answer me. But there were no more replies from her. I picked up the phone with trembling hands. It was warm, as if it had been in recent use. The battery showed 95%. Someone had been charging it, keeping it running. I checked the messages. The one I had received was the only one that appeared in our chat since her disappearance. But when I opened the main menu, I saw something that left me breathless. There were 87 recorded voice messages, all unsent, all addressed to me. All 87 messages my daughter had recorded but had never sent me. With shaky fingers, I played the first one. Audrey's voice filled the silent office, and I had to hold on to the desk to keep from falling. Mum, I don't know how to tell you this. I found something about Dad. Something I don't understand. There are papers here in his office. Documents that talk about money we didn't know he had. Mom, I think Dad lied to us about a lot of things. I paused the recording, feeling the world wobble beneath my feet. Audrey sounded scared, confused. The recording was dated 2 days before her disappearance. I played the next message. Mum, I found a safe behind the filing cabinet. Inside there is cash. A lot of cash. And there are documents for properties we don't know about. A house in the suburbs. Land. Mom, where did all this money come from? The shop never made that much. My breathing became uneven. Walter had always told me we barely made enough to live comfortably. He never mentioned additional properties or large amounts of money saved. The third message devastated me. Mom, there's something else. I found receipts, invoices. It looks like Dad had dealings with people we don't know. There are names here, phone numbers, and some have notes that say things like pending and remember to call. One of the papers has an address and it says second family. Mom, I don't understand what this means, but I'm scared. Second family. The words resonated in my head like a painful echo. I sat in Walter's chair, the very chair where he sat every day to drink his coffee and check his notes. And I felt as if I were meeting a stranger. I continued playing the messages. Audrey's voice grew more desperate, more frightened with each recording. "Mum," I called one of the numbers I found. A woman answered, and when I told her I was Robert Miller's daughter, she went silent and then hung up on me. But before she hung up, I managed to hear her say, "It can't be. He said he didn't have any children." I stood up abruptly, knocking over the chair. "He said he didn't have any children, Walter. My husband of 30 years, Audrey's father, had denied her existence to someone else." The next message was even worse. "Mom, I researched the address that said second family. I went there. It is a nice house in the Rosewood neighborhood. I knocked on the door and a woman in her 52nds opened it. When I asked her if she knew Walter Parker, she turned pale. She told me she was his wife. His wife? Walter had been married to another woman. For how long, I did not know. But the fact was there, recorded in my daughter's broken voice. The woman's name is Vivian. She has 2 children with Dad. Mom, 2 children. A boy of 15 and a girl of 12, when I told her I was his daughter. 2. She fainted. She literally fainted. My legs gave way, and I sat down again. Walter had not only had another woman, he had had other children, a complete family he had kept secret for years. Message number 20 explained how Audrey had discovered all this. Mom, after Dad died, I could not sleep. I kept coming here to the office at night, trying to feel close to him. One night, I decided to look through everything more thoroughly to organize his papers better for when we were ready to sell. That's when I found the safe behind the filing cabinet. The code was my birthday. Of course, it was her birthday. Walter had always been sentimental about important dates. I never imagined he would use that combination to protect such devastating secrets. I continued listening, message after message, as my world completely fell apart. Audrey had spent days investigating, trying to understand her father's double life. She had found statements for bank accounts I did not know about. She had discovered that Walter had been regularly sending money to Vivian and her children. Message number 43 broke my heart. Mom, I don't know how to tell you this. I don't know if I should tell you. Dad did not just have another family. The money he sent them, the money to maintain that other house, that other life. He was taking it from our accounts. From the money you earned with your baking, from the money we had saved for my college. For years, Mum, for years he stole from you to maintain his other family. I put my hands to my face and cried as I had not cried since Walter's funeral. But these were not tears of grief for a beloved husband. They were tears of betrayal, of humiliation, of rage. 30 years of marriage. 30 years believing I knew the man I shared my bed, my table, my life with. 30 years being a fool who worked day and night to help maintain our home. Unaware that my money was financing my husband's betrayal. But the messages did not end there. When I got to message number 60, Audrey's voice changed. She no longer sounded just sad or confused. She sounded terrified. Mum, I think someone is following me. Since I went to talk to Vivian, I've seen the same car parked near our house. A man followed me to the grocery store yesterday. I'm scared. Mom, I'm very scared. I continued playing the messages with shaking hands. Audrey's voice became more desperate with each recording, and I sank deeper into a reality I had never imagined possible. Message number 65 chilled my blood. Mum, the man who was following me approached me today. He was waiting for me outside the bank when I left after making a deposit. He is tall, wears a black suit, and has a scar on his left cheek. He told me he knew I had been investigating Dad's affairs and that it could bring me trouble. I paused the recording and stood up, pacing the small office. What kind of life had Walter been leading? What kind of people had he gotten involved with? I continued with the next message. The man told me Dad owed money to someone very dangerous. A lot of money. $400,000. Mom. He said Dad had promised to pay before he died, but that obviously the debt did not go with him to the grave. He asked me if I knew where that money was. $400,000, a sum we had never had. Not even when the shop was doing better. My head was spinning trying to process all this information. Mom, I told him I didn't know anything about any debt, that Dad never told us about it. Then he smiled at me in a way that gave me chills and said, "Well, you better find out fast because now the debt belongs to you and your mum." My breath caught. Audrey and I had inherited a debt of $400,000 to dangerous people, and we did not even know it. The next message explained more. Mum, I investigated more about this debt. Apparently, Dad borrowed that money to buy the properties I found in the documents. But instead of using the money for that, he spent it on maintaining Vivian and her children for years. The house they live in, the children's private schools, Vivian's new car, all paid for with money borrowed from people who do not forgive. Walter had borrowed almost $500,000 and had spent it on his other family, leaving us with the debt. The betrayal was so deep it was hard to breathe. But message number 70 completely destroyed me. Mom, I went to confront Vivian. I told her about the debt and the threats. Do you know what she told me? That she knew about the debt. That Walter had told her everything before he died, but had assured her that you and I would take care of paying because we were the fools who believed we were his main family. Those were her exact words. Mom, the fools. I sat down on the office floor and cried until I had no more tears. My entire marriage had been a lie. Walter had not only cheated on me with another woman, but he had used me as his financial backup plan. While I worked day and night making cakes and pastries to supplement our income, he was spending that money on maintaining his real family and laughing at me with his mistress. If this story has touched you, please subscribe to the channel and share this video with others. It helps me grow and reach more people. Message number 75 explained why Audrey had disappeared. Mum, the man with the scar came back. This time he was not alone. There were 3 of them, and they surrounded me when I left work. They told me they had a proposal. If I disappeared forever, if I never came home and never told you about the debt, they would leave you alone. They said a 62-year-old woman working in baking could never pay $400,000, but if I left and never came back, they would consider the debt settled. My daughter had disappeared to protect me. She had sacrificed herself so I would not have to face those dangerous men. Mom, I could not tell you the truth about Dad when he had just died. I could not destroy you with all this information when you were barely processing his loss. And I could not expose you to the danger of that debt either. So I made the most difficult decision of my life. The following recordings explained how Audrey had planned her disappearance. She had secretly sold her jewelry and some valuables to get cash. She had researched small towns where she could live without a trace. She had prepared everything to leave forever. Mom, I programmed my phone to send you a message after exactly 6 months. I wanted you to have time to heal a little from Dad's death before knowing the truth. And I wanted to make sure the men were no longer watching you. Message number 80 broke my heart. Mom, if you are listening to this, it means 6 months have passed, and I hope you're okay. I hope you've been able to move on without me. I know it must be horrible not knowing what happened to me, but it was the only way to keep you safe. Audrey had calculated everything, even in the most desperate moments of her life. She had thought of me first. The documents you need are in the safe. The code is my birthday 080319995. All the evidence of what Dad did is there. All the properties he bought with borrowed money. All the documents of the other family. I stood up and looked for the filing cabinet Audrey had mentioned. Indeed, behind it was a small safe embedded in the wall, almost invisible in the shadows. I dialed Audrey's birthday 080319995. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside, I found exactly what Audrey had described. Wads of bills, property documents, contracts, and a thick folder labeled Vivian and Family. There was also a notebook in Walter's handwriting where he had noted all the payments he had made to his other family for years. But what impacted me the most was a handwritten letter addressed to me in Walter's handwriting. It was dated a week before his death. Elaine Parker. If you are reading this, it is because I am gone and someone found my secrets. I know there is no excuse for what I did. I know I lied to you for years and that I used your money to maintain Vivian and my other children. I know I deserve your hatred. I continued reading with trembling hands. Vivian got pregnant 18 years ago when you and I were going through a rough patch. Instead of confessing my infidelity to you, I decided to keep that family a secret. At first, it was just money for the baby. But after that, Vivian asked me for more and more. She threatened to tell you everything if I did not help her. Walter had been blackmailed by his mistress for years, but that did not justify him using my money to pay her. When the second child was born, Vivian demanded a house, a car, private schools. I did not have that money, so I borrowed from people I later discovered were very dangerous. I thought I could pay with the shop's profits, but it was never enough. The letter continued explaining how the debt had grown with interest, how Walter had kept borrowing more money to pay previous debts, and how he had finally become trapped in a vicious circle. The stress of maintaining this lie for so many years made me sick. The doctors said my heart could not take it anymore. I know I am going to die soon. And I know I am leaving this problem to you and Audrey. I am sorrier than words can express. At the end of the letter, Walter had written something that made me boil with rage. Vivian knows about the debt. I told her that if something happened to me, you and Audrey would take care of it. She agrees because she says you were the ones who benefited from living with me all these years. The ones who benefited, as if having been cheated and stolen from for 30 years was a benefit. I returned to Audrey's phone to listen to the last messages. Her voice in the final recording sounded resigned but determined. Mom, I know this is going to hurt you, but you need to know the whole truth so you can make the best decisions. The money in the safe is $50,000 that I was able to recover from one of Dad's accounts before Vivian emptied the rest. Only $50,000 of a $400,000 debt. There are also documents that show some of the properties still have value. If you sell them, you could perhaps raise $200,000 more. It is not enough to pay the whole debt, but it is something. Audrey's last message broke my heart. Mum, please forgive me for abandoning you this way. Please understand. It was the only way to keep you safe. I am going to disappear forever, but I want you to know I love you more than you could ever imagine. You have been the best mother in the world, and you did not deserve any of this. Take good care of yourself, and please try to be happy. Life is too short to waste its suffering over Dad's lies. I remained sitting in that cold, silent office, surrounded by the secrets and lies of a man I thought I knew. My daughter had sacrificed herself to save me from a debt I did not even know I had, from criminals I had never heard of. But Audrey did not know something I had just discovered among the papers in the safe. There was an address on a separate paper written in different handwriting, and a note that said, "If something goes wrong, she is here." Audrey had not disappeared forever. She had left a clue for me to find her. The address on the paper was written in a handwriting I did not recognize, but something in my gut told me it was important. Maplewood Town, Luna Street, number 2, 143. If something goes wrong, she is here. There was no further explanation. Just those words scribbled on a yellowish piece of paper. Maplewood was a 3-hour drive from the city. It was a small town in the mountains, the kind of place where one could disappear without attracting attention. The perfect kind of place to hide. I put all the documents and the money in my purse. I did not know if it was safe to leave them in the office, especially now that I knew dangerous people were involved in this whole affair. Before leaving, I played Audrey's phone one more time, recording a voice note for her in case she could ever hear it. Audrey, my love, if you ever hear this, I want you to know I understand why you did what you did. And I want you to know that I'm going to find you. I arrived home when dawn was breaking. I had not slept all night, but the adrenaline kept me awake. I needed to plan my trip to Maplewood, but first I had to make sure I was prepared for what I might find there. I took all the documents out of the safe and spread them on the dining table. There was much more than I had been able to look through at the office. Bank statements showing regular transfers of $5,000 a month to Vivian's account for the last 15 years. Invoices for private schools. Health insurance payments. Even receipts for family vacations. Walter had paid for his other family. $75,000 a year for 15 years. More than $1 million that had left our accounts without me realizing it. How could I have been so blind? How had I not noticed that so much money was missing? But then I remembered how our marriage worked. Walter handled all the finances. I handed over the profits from my baking, and he took care of paying all the bills and managing the savings. He gave me an amount for my personal expenses, and I never questioned the rest. I trusted him completely. Among the papers, I found something that chilled my blood. A life insurance policy in Walter's name for $500,000. A policy I did not know about, and of which I was the beneficiary. Walter had planned his financial death. He knew his heart was failing. He knew he was going to die and had taken out an insurance policy so I could pay his debt after his death. But there was a problem. The policy was dated only 2 months before his death. Insurance companies do not pay if the insured dies so soon after taking out the policy, especially if they had pre-existing medical conditions. I called the insurance company from my phone. After waiting 20 minutes on the line, a representative confirmed what I feared. The policy had been denied because Walter had not disclosed his heart condition at the time of purchase. There was no $500,000 waiting for me. I only had the $50,000 from the safe and the properties Audrey had mentioned. I spent the rest of the morning researching the value of those properties online. There were 3 plots of land on the outskirts of the city and a small house in a middle-class neighborhood. If I was lucky and sold them quickly, they could give me about $200,000, just as Audrey had calculated. But $250,000 was still $150,000 less than Walter owed. At 2 p.m., I got into my car and began the journey to Maplewood. I did not know what I expected to find there, but it was the only clue I had to find Audrey. The road to Maplewood wound through the mountains, gradually climbing between pines and rocks. It was a beautiful landscape that under other circumstances I would have enjoyed. But my mind was completely focused on what awaited me at the end of the trip. Would Audrey really be at that address, or would it be another disappointment? Another false lead in this endless nightmare. Maplewood turned out to be exactly what I had imagined. A small town with a main street, a few shops, a gas station, and houses scattered among the trees, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone and outsiders attract attention immediately. I found Luna Street without difficulty. It was a quiet residential street with small houses and well-kept gardens. Number 243 was a wooden house, painted light blue with a small porch and flower pots in the windows. I parked on the street and sat for a few minutes observing the house. There were no signs of life. No cars in the garage. The curtains were closed. Finally, I summoned the courage and knocked on the door. The woman who opened it was about 60 years old. Grey hair pulled back in a ponytail and very gentle blue eyes. She looked at me with curiosity, but without alarm. "Can I help you with something?" she asked me. "I am looking for my daughter," I said, and my voice broke a little. "Her name is Audrey. I think she might be here." The woman's expression changed immediately. Her eyes filled with compassion, and she opened the door wider. "You must be Elaine Parker," she said softly. "I am Brenda. Audrey told me a lot about you. Please come in." I followed Brenda into a small, cozy living room. On the coffee table, there was a photo of Audrey smiling, and my heart filled with hope and pain at the same time. "Where is she?" I asked. Brenda sat in front of me and took my hands. "Audrey is fine. she said, and I felt as if I could breathe for the first time in 6 months. She is alive and she is safe. But there are some things you need to know before you see her. What thing? I asked, although part of me feared the answer. Brenda sighed deeply. Audrey arrived here 5 months ago, broken and terrified. She told me the whole story about her father, about the debt, about the threats. But she also told me something else. Something she did not put in those recordings because she was afraid of how you would react. What? I whispered. Elaine Parker. Walter did not die of a natural heart attack. Brenda's words hit me like lightning. I remained paralyzed, processing what I had just heard. What do you mean? I managed to ask. Brenda got up and brought a folder from a nearby desk. Audrey investigated more after discovering the debt. She spoke with the doctor who attended Walter in his last days. She reviewed the medical reports. She asked questions that a daughter has the right to ask. She opened the folder and showed me several medical documents. Walter had heart problems. That is true. But the medications he was taking were not for the heart. They were medications that, combined with alcohol, can cause a heart attack that looks natural. I stared at the papers without fully understanding. Walter was being slowly poisoned. Brenda continued. Someone had been putting those medications in his food or drinks for weeks before his death. Who? I asked. Although deep down I was already beginning to suspect the answer. Vivian, Brenda said simply. Vivian knew Walter could no longer keep borrowing money. The lenders were pressuring, threatening to hurt the whole family if he did not pay. So she decided to kill him and let the insurance policy pay the debt. But the policy was rejected, I said weakly. She did not know that. Walter had lied to her about the policy conditions just as he lied to you about everything else. I sank into the sofa, feeling as if the world was spinning around me. Walter had not only been a liar and a swindler, he had been murdered by his mistress, who had then planned for me to pay both their debts. There is more, Brenda said softly. Audrey has evidence. She found the medications at Vivian's house. She found text messages where Vivian talked to someone about resolving the problem with Walter permanently. She has everything documented. Why did she not go to the police? I asked. Brenda looked at me sadly. Because Vivian threatened to kill her too. And then you. She said, if Audrey spoke, you two would suffer the same fate as Walter. I understood then why Audrey had fled. She was not just protecting me from a debt, but from a murderer. Where is Audrey now? I asked. Brenda smiled for the first time since this conversation began. She is at work. She got a job at the town library. We thought it was the safest place for her. Quiet and low profile. She will be home at 6. I looked at my watch. It was 4:30 p.m. Brenda, I said, I need to ask you something very important. Did Audrey know you were going to tell me all this? Brenda nodded. She asked me to tell you everything if you ever came looking for her. She said you deserved to know the complete truth, but that she did not have the courage to tell you directly. I leaned back on the sofa, feeling completely exhausted, but also relieved. My daughter was alive. She was safe. And in an hour and a half, I would see her again. But I had also just discovered that my husband had been murdered by his mistress, who was now free, and probably thinking about how to get rid of the only witnesses to her crime. At exactly 6, I heard the sound of a key in the front door. My heart started pounding so hard I thought it would jump out of my chest. Brenda had prepared tea for me, and we had talked more about the situation, but nothing had prepared me for this moment. I heard steps in the hallway and then a familiar voice I had not heard in 6 months. Brenda, I'm home. How was your day? Audrey, Brenda said softly. There is someone here who wants to see you. The steps stopped. There was a long silence, and then Audrey appeared in the doorway. Allow us to take your fingerprints for comparison. You already have my fingerprints, I interrupted. They told me they found them at the scene. Another exchange of glances between the two men. The younger one approached and whispered something in the detective's ear. Brooks nodded slowly. It's true. We have them. Which makes your insistence that you weren't there even harder to believe. Do you understand the situation you're putting yourself in? Yes. I understood. I understood perfectly that someone had planned this very carefully. Someone who knew where I went, how I dressed,